In letters shared publicly, Trump stated that the tariffs are aimed at correcting what he called long-standing imbalances in U.S. trade. He accused the EU of maintaining non-reciprocal trade barriers and labeled the U.S. trade deficit a national security risk. Regarding Mexico, Trump cited insufficient action in curbing the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigration. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded by affirming a commitment to dialogue, while reserving the right to impose countermeasures. French President Emmanuel Macron and other EU leaders also warned against the escalation of a transatlantic trade conflict. Mexico's government expressed disagreement with the measure, calling it unfair treatment during high-level talks with U.S. officials. President Claudia Sheinbaum said she remains hopeful for a diplomatic resolution. If implemented, the tariffs will apply broadly across sectors, affecting exports such as European cars, pharmaceuticals, and Mexican agricultural goods. The U.S. currently has pending trade agreements with the United Kingdom and Vietnam, but has paused similar talks with other nations. The administration has not clarified whether USMCA-compliant goods from Mexico will be exempt. Watch this.
Liberation Day, the 2nd of April. The U.S. president now, months later, and short on results in his trade tariff war, is intensifying the battle, announcing he would hit two of the United States' largest trading partners. In letters to Mexico and the EU, he vows a 30% tariff on imports starting on the 1st of August if there is no trade deal, and warns that figure would be increased if they retaliated. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded saying, "We will continue working towards an agreement by August 1st. At the same time, we are ready to safeguard EU interests on the basis of proportionate countermeasures." The threat marks an escalation of a trade war that has rattled investors.
It really is a slap in the face.
This researcher at the Brussels-based think tank Bruegel argues Trump's move now will backfire.
I think what he has signaled to the EU is that all the efforts that the European Commission has made to try to accommodate, try to negotiate a deal, meant nothing for Trump.
Again, especially on Love World USA, we've talked about this time and time again. The president is open to making deals. He's made many deals. We saw, again, what he did with Iran, where he gave them 60 days to come to a nuclear resolution, and by the 61st day, Israel had struck. A few days later, the U.S. sent B-2, it's either B-2 or B-52, but they sent their stealth bombers to Fordo, to Esfahan, and to the Natanz, nuclear enrichment sites. The president is open to making deals. In fact, he allows for patience because he didn't have to take 60 days to deal with Iran. Pretty much, every nuclear watchdog and all of the interested parties knew that Iran wasn't going to come to the table that soon. So with the pauses that he's placed on the Liberation Day tariffs, remember, we covered Liberation Day in April. We're in July now. So when you're hearing this uproar, you have to understand that months have been given. Weeks have passed in which these politicians, understanding that President Trump has done this before, and we saw the market shake. We saw the tumultuous results. We saw we literally saw markets seizing. Time and time again, the Japanese markets, different Asian markets, their stock markets literally stopped trading because of the tumultuous results of Liberation Day. So you have to keep that in mind when you're asking, well, why is Trump doing this? Because they're trying to call his bluff. They don't think that he will do it because he did Liberation Day and he paused. But unfortunately, the saying goes, if you mess with the bull, you get the horns. And on August 1st, it seems like it's coming to Europe and Mexico. So now he's giving them a final timeline. Come to the table, let's strike the agreement, or if not on August 1st, you'll see what he's really about. It's as simple as that. Federal immigration authorities arrested 319 individuals during a raid on a Ventura County cannabis farm on July 10th, marking the largest ICE worksite operation of President Trump's second term. The operation at Glass House Farms led to the rescue of 14 minors, including a 14-year-old from potential labor exploitation. One of those detained was identified as a convicted violent offender with prior charges, including attempted child molestation and kidnapping. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem confirmed the arrest and the children's rescue. Authorities said the investigation is ongoing, including a review of all detainees' criminal records. The raid drew violent protests. Federal agents were reportedly assaulted, and at least one protester allegedly discharged a firearm. when an individual died after falling from a greenhouse during the chaos. The farm, whose leadership has donated to both Democratic and Republican candidates, is now under investigation for possible child labor law violations. ICE and Customs and Border Protection officials say additional enforcement actions are under consideration. Let's take a look.
We went there because we knew specifically from casework we had built for weeks and weeks and weeks that there was children there that could be trafficked, being exploited, that there was individuals there involved in criminal activity, and we found over 100 individuals that were involved in that and unaccompanied children there that we had been looking for.
And Secretary Noem confirmed that the operations in Camarillo as well as Carpinteria were the largest since President Trump took office.
As somebody who's covering the story, the facts about this story still repulse me to now. And I have to say it again and again and again. Because to some of the viewers at home, you may have family, you may have friends who, if they were to tune into this broadcast, would immediately disagree with a lot of what is being said. But here's the truth. And when you speak to them, this is what you need to discuss. Why is it that there is no formal condemnation? Because of course you don't throw a baby out with the bathwater, and you don't judge a whole group by singular efforts inside the group. But when they are bad apples inside that group, why can't they be formally condemned and then you deal with the rest? Speaking about the arrest, they said that there was somebody who was there on child molestation charges in their country, who was working inside the United States, where if they came in the right way, if they even tried to apply the right way, they would have never been allowed. And now they're working there with underage children who are undocumented. So if anything happens to them, nobody knows because their parents aren't there. There's no legal system there to protect them. And this is part of what's perpetuated with this border movement. This is part of what's perpetuated when you allow people, or when you promote people coming in. And yes, you can work under the table, which, they're getting paid pennies to the dollar, working in the hard sun, and then you have children working in a cannabis factory because that's the only way that they can make money to take care of themselves. Meanwhile, these children need to be in school, they need to be learning, they should be with their parents. But because there's an illicit system that promotes this kind of behavior, these are the issues you end up with. Children working with child molesters. And then when you actually put it again in theory and you're hearing about the protests because of this, you won't hear anybody decry the fact that child molesters are being hired in America. At least let's address that and then we move on to everything else, right? Because of course, it's not like the overall population of the workers, were criminals. But when you have such a bad apple, you have to pick it out and address it so that the general public can understand that you don't support this. Because when you're supporting all of it, they're included in the all. And that's the issue time and time again. Like they say, common sense isn't common. Former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines has criticized the proposed change to gendered language in Wisconsin budget bill during her speech at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit on Saturday. The bill reportedly attempted to replace the word mother with inseminated person, in state statute, drawing backlash from conservative commentators. Gaines expressed concern over what she described as the erosion of traditional definitions of motherhood. According to her remarks, the bill also substituted father with natural parent, prompting questions about the broader implications of such terminology. There's not a whole lot more dehumanizing than that, she said, referencing the proposed changes. Now in the third trimester of her pregnancy, Gaines also spoke about her pro-life views, saying her experiences made the issue more personal. She described hearing her unborn child's heartbeat and seeing sonogram images as key moments that shaped her perspective. The Turning Point USA Student Action Summit gathers young conservatives from across the country to hear from speakers on political and cultural issues. Gaines' comments were among several that addressed concerns about gender, life, and language in policy making. This is something that I've said time and time again. Words are powerful. The Bible tells us that words are powerful. In the Word of God it says, and you shall have what you say. And the issue, and one of the first things that this sinister agenda seems to tackle, is that it seems to tackle speech. I mean, you look in Canada, where, I mean, if I recall correctly now, misgendering somebody. So if you see somebody who's biologically male, but they identify as female, and you call them, a male, that's a crime, and that's now considered hate speech. So now they try to police the words, and now they go into politics, and now instead of having a mother, you have an inseminated person. Dehumanizing isn't even enough to describe it, because motherhood is a privilege and a joy. So to reduce a mother, somebody who carries life inside of their womb for 9 months, to an inseminated person, different things can be inseminated, if we're putting it frankly, through IVF, you can have an egg inseminated, but that egg isn't the mother. The woman bearing the child, going through childbirth, getting ready for those labor pangs, that's the mother. And then having the father as a natural parent, again, they try to twist the definitions of things. And the issue is that if you don't know better, you don't know better. Because the way that it was described, in Greek philosophy, it's very simple. Words and things are connected. We understand things through words.
Because everything that we relate to in this world has a word. It has a term. If you're at home, think about it. What can you think about that you don't have a word for? Even space you can't interact with, the word for it is space. Even if you've never thought of it before, if you try to imagine something new right now, and I ask you to describe it, you would have a word for it. Because words control the way we think. They affect the way we think. That's why we have to speak properly. So when you have these people trying to change the way that people speak, trying to change the way that things are addressed, they're going for your thoughts. They're going for the thoughts of those who don't know better, and that's how they get in. That's why it's big for Riley Gaines to push back against these issues,
because it seems so small. Well, I can still call them a mother, although now the official term is now inseminated person, until later on, an inch taken becomes a mile, and now it's hate speech. Be careful. The Federal Emergency Management Agency reportedly approved multiple appeals to remove dozens of Camp Mystic buildings from a designated flood hazard zone in the years leading up to a July 4th flash flood that killed at least 27 people, including campers and staff. Records reviewed and reported by the Associated Press show FEMA amended Kerr County's flood maps in 2013, 2019, and 2020, excluding structures from regulation under the 100-year floodplain designation. The decisions impacted both the original Camp Mystic site along the Guadalupe River and its newer Cypress Lake expansion. FEMA says its flood maps are intended to set minimum standards and do not predict flood events. Climate data experts and analysts say the properties remained at clear risk and note that nearly all the structures at this original campsite fall within high-risk zones when analyzed using independent climate models. Critics have raised concerns that the exemption process may benefit property owners with financial or political advantages. The flood, described by officials as far exceeding a 100-year event, struck before dawn during a period of intense rainfall and overwhelmed local emergency systems. FEMA referred inquiries about construction oversight and continued camp operations to local officials who have not responded publicly. Watch this.
FEMA removed 15 of the camp's buildings from the hazard area in 2013 and 15 more between 2019 and 2020. Those buildings were located on a sister site that opened as part of an expansion and were less impacted by the flood. FEMA did note in the amendments that other parts of the camp were still in the flood map. FEMA says flood maps are snapshots in time and are not predictions of where it will flood.
What gross negligence. And to the viewers at home, pardon my strong tone in saying that, but when you have lives lost over something that, again, they did note, but they removed, I think gross negligence is genuinely the only way to put it. Because, again, Camp Mystic was